Make way for Dark Helmet!
All rise in the presence of Dark Helmet.
So, Darktide came out yesterday, and overshadowing everything at the moment is the Commodore's Vestures, the premium cosmetic shop aboard the Morningstar. I hate doing videos on stuff like this, man. I'd rather not, right? I'd rather just be playing the game. It just came out. I want to slice Poxwalkers in half, dude. I'm blowing them to pieces with my bolt gun. Is that too much to ask? But this is a feature we need to talk about, and to that point, it's time for some tough love that may very well fall on deaf ears, but that's okay. I'm gonna put my piece forward, and the chips will fall as they may. I'm not angry, man. I'm just disappointed. I'd been under the impression that Fat Shark would wait a month or two after launch to ensure that Darktide was feature complete, and that the major crashing and performance issues that ran rampant during both beta periods had been ironed out and addressed before unveiling anything like a premium store. That feeling became even more apparent playing through the pre-order beta experience over the last couple weeks, one that I thoroughly enjoyed, and will continue to enjoy into the full game because I think Darktide is great. I think it is a legitimately good game, and has tremendous promise moving forward. But it has had very clear-cut problems, well-documented issues across all three public releases, and I will say, showing weapons in gameplay trailers in pre-release that aren't in at launch is not a good look. Showing bosses in cinematic trailers that aren't in at launch is not a good look. Showing crafting in release trailers, knowing that people would rightfully assume that such an integral component of Vermintide would be carried over to Darktide on day one, and then not communicating that the feature would not be fully available on release until maybe only a handful of days before launch, is not a good look. I fully expect all those things will come, maybe even quickly, and I do not think there was any attempt to actively deceive people over those situations. But when you combine all that with a relatively unstable title in its current form, a host of performance issues across a wide array of systems, and a whole crap ton of bug talents, abilities, and gameplay features, purely from an optics perspective, launching Darktide with a paid premium cosmetics cash shop is not a good look. Let me be very clear. I do not have a problem with developers creating cool, custom cosmetics to sell to help supplement the cost of development. That is not the issue. I want the devs to be supported for their efforts. I have no problem with skins and purely visual options being sold for real money. It is a great way to extend the lifecycle and continued support for a title, but there are ways to do that without nickel and diming with scummy sales tactics, and it should not be front and center on day one when there are obvious issues that are preventing large numbers of players from enjoying Darktide in the way that they should be able to, and when your game is not feature complete. Simply put, the shop should not have been added before this game was feature complete, which means fully implemented crafting, the weapons that were directly advertised in gameplay trailers that didn't make it into the game, like the Ogre and Shockmaul, like the Psyker two-handed sword, and performance and stability at least in a better state than it is currently now. So let me enumerate all the issues I have with the cash shop as it stands, and why it's a big step in the wrong direction compared to Loner's Emporium from Vermintide 2. Before anyone says anything about how I already bought a skin, no, I didn't. I was given the Imperial Edition. I haven't bought anything and can't really recommend doing so on the cosmetics front until some changes are made. So, number one, instead of buying skins or bundles outright with real money, we are using a premium currency called Aquilus. So already, we are creating a disconnect between real money and this fake currency, the purpose of which is to muddy the waters and make it less clear how much cash you're actually spending. In and of itself, wouldn't be so bad, except that when you look at the pricing structure here, you can see that these full sets, which look really cool by the way, great work from the artists all across the board, cost 2,400 Aquilus. But if you wanted to buy more, you'd only be able to acquire them in bundles of 2,100 or 4,500 at $10 and $20 respectively. What this does is create a situation where you are always going to be left with too much or too little currency, incentivizing you to spend more than what is required to get the skins you want. The prices are quite deliberately obtuse, uneven, and designed in a somewhat predatory manner, which becomes all the more apparent when you look at the individual prices of specific items, which become laughably inflated and combine to be much more expensive when added individually together. For example, buying the Ogre and Bulwark skin would be almost $20 if you bought each piece separately, compared to $11 or $12 as a full package. So the game is actively encouraging you to buy bundled products as part of these full sets, but those full sets are at strange prices that don't really match up with the values of currency and how those are available. Potentially even more egregious here, these skins appear to be on a rotating storefront that shifts every week and a half or so. What happens when the timer runs out? Will they disappear into the void, never to return? Will they enter a catalog that I can access at any given time? We have no idea, but just the fact that we're discussing the possibility of cosmetics disappearing for weeks or months at a time, or maybe disappearing permanently, makes it clear the system is designed to prey on your fear of missing out, that you must buy now, or potentially forever hold your peace. That's before we even get into the fact that when browsing the shop, you can't even get a full view of what these outfits actually look like in-game. The portrait is still there, of course, but there's no option to look at the in-game model as a whole. Rotate it, inspect it, make sure it's something you'd actually want to wear, something you'd actually want to spend money on. And there's still no option like we had in Vermintide to inspect the characters themselves while in-game, which is the whole point of cosmetics. Like sure, I can see myself in the Morningstar, but both Vermintide 1 and Vermintide 2 allow me to inspect my character in battle, when I'm actually playing, before a horde or when crossing a particularly cool piece of scenery. You press X, you zoom out, you look at your character, you see the background, you get more immersed in the setting that way. If the devs are going to put such a heavy emphasis on visual upgrades, it's important that we get to see them and interact with them while playing the game itself, and at the moment, that functionality does not exist. Perhaps even more importantly, that functionality is functionality that existed in Vermintide, a game that came out years before. So we've taken some significant steps backward from Loner's Emporium in Vermintide 2, where players could purchase premium skins and hats directly for real money, and where there was substantially better variety that you could unlock just by playing the game. Also important to note that that didn't launch for years after the title first dropped. Vermintide was feature complete by the time Loner's Emporium came out, and that is a big difference between how things transpired then and how things went down yesterday for Darktide. My question is, why are these tactics even necessary? Fatshark has a passionate fanbase, and while there are unquestionably a subset of grognards who will freak out and overreact and become rude, spiteful creatures given the most minuscule of reasons, the majority of people who play these titles are calm, normal, reasonable friends who just want the game to succeed and will at least consider buying a skin or two just to help out and because they want to look cool. As long as they feel like they aren't being preyed upon. As long as they don't feel like the scummy MTX handbook is pulling out all the stops to try to get them to buy. The element that bothers me about this is that it just feels kind of short-sighted. That yes, of course whales are going to drop tons of money here, but they were going to do that anyway. With this current setup, you're potentially driving away customers just for short-term profit. Make a good game, support the series well, fix bugs and server issues in a timely manner, and make a reasonable cash shop, and people will actively want to buy skins. I think a lot of people are going to be actively turned off when they boot up Commodore's Vestures for the first time. And that isn't a good way to engender loyalty or respect or make people want to buy your product. And let me be clear again, this whole thing, it doesn't take away from the gameplay side at all. It's not pay to win in any way, shape, or form. There are still cool cosmetics you can earn in-game, although some of the penances are a little bit ridiculous and were not very well thought out. Different topic. It's hardly the most toxic or ridiculous monetization system I've ever seen. There have been and will continue to be much worse than the system we have in Darktide right now. But it's still indicative of a problem that has plagued the gaming industry for a long time now, where RNG and gambling and fear of missing out create these perfect storms that are ripe for abuse. And what gets me is that it isn't necessary to make money or support the game long term. Not in the way it's been set up. There are tons of more consumer conscious and reasonable ways to go about this that would still net them crazy returns, that would still be a great look on their profit margin and income for the year. So whether you want to blame Fatshark or Tencent's 36% minority stake or whoever, I don't really care. I'm not really sure it even matters. All that matters is that as a fan of the series, as someone with a vested interest in its long-term success, as someone who really wants to rock some kick-ass Krieg skins, and will be covering the series for a long time because I enjoy it, when I look at the current status of the cash shop, I don't feel like it's something I want to support until there are some changes made. So I'll suggest a couple things here. Number one, the easiest way to improve the situation is let people buy exactly what they want, directly, with real money, and gradually introduce additional free cosmetics that can be earned just by playing the game. There are already plenty of those in, and there are some cool ones, even though some people will try to convince you otherwise. But if you occasionally toss people a bone, then they're going to be more likely to want to spend real money on your game. Hunt Showdown is a perfect example, where you can buy a unique hunter and weapon skins for $8 to $10, and it doesn't really bother people, because you know what you're getting for a clear price, and the DLC won't ever disappear if you don't jump on it fast enough. I don't really see Fat Shark getting rid of Aquilus at this point, so if they insist on awkwardly obfuscating the value of each item, then at least give players the ability to earn premium currency to cover the difference. So if I completed, say, a month's worth of weekly challenges, I wouldn't have to buy the full $10 of Aquilas just to cover the measly $300 that I'm missing. Making some of that earnable to cover that difference would go a long way in making it feel like a better system, which I know, defeats the purpose of what a premium currency system like this one is meant to achieve in the first place. That's the problem. Number 2, and this one should be maybe even easier to implement, get rid of this ridiculous FOMO timer and put all cosmetics in a storefront where you can buy them anytime you want. Maybe that's the game plan here, but I kinda doubt it when you see a timeline saying, oh, you've got 8 days remaining. Like, why else would you put that in there? As long as there's a marketplace where I can go in and buy that at any time, a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, then it's not really as big a deal. But that timer is explicitly put in there for that fear of missing out, and it's not really something that I feel like they need to be preying upon. Artificially cycling them in and out of a cyberstore like there's a limited quantity, or like this is some limited time offer, is simply gross. It's toxic, and it's unnecessary. And I can promise you, there are plenty of devs at Fat Shark who don't like how this store was implemented, who knew immediately when it was pitched to them there would be a sizable blowback from the community when we got our hands on it. I guarantee they've had discussions internally about this eventuality. And to an extent, I think you could make an argument the reaction has been overblown. It often is in these kind of situations, and for many of them, maybe all of them, this whole situation might have been entirely out of their control anyway, that they had no real say in how this shop was implemented. But it sucks right now, and it does deserve looking into. Ultimately, this is not the biggest deal in the world. It is not going to prevent me from playing Darktide and enjoying the game for what it is. But the timing and launch date feels kind of poorly handled to an extent, and that is a shame because I feel like it's taking the focus off some pretty stellar gameplay. Darktide is super fun. It is a good game. The devs have made some awesome adjustments since the beta. There's more transparency in stats, there's less ridiculous level requirements in grinding for unique weapons for each class, which means you get that better experience much earlier, and it is clear that Fat Shark are listening to feedback and are working to make this overall experience as good as possible. And for that, I am grateful. So what I'm hoping is that they will keep that same energy when addressing the monetization systems for Darktide and work on something that will be more palatable for everyone and less distracting from an otherwise awesome game, barring the crashing and performance issues, of course. So, let me know what you all think, and I will see you all in the next one. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.